Hey, thanks everybody. Usually when people hear that an economist is going to speak, they choose to have and schedule their root canal and stuff. So I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak today. What I want to talk today about is a report that we're publishing in about a week, and it talks about the amount of debt and financing that is forecasted to be required to support the growth of the cannabis industry through 2035. And so we teamed up with C Trust and Green Check, and so we really appreciated their sponsorship on this report. And we did some surveys. We talked to people. We got average investments that they require to get started up. We did a lot of reports on a lot of data on delinquencies and cash flow issues and the like, and then we put this all together. And so today I wanted to go through some of the data. So some of the things that we looked at was the forecast for the demand. And it's not so wild to think that it's actually quite predictable. And so we modeled the ramps of all the different states, looked at what is going on from year 1, year 2, year 10, whatever. And then we looked at the amount of legal consumer participation, because the growth in the industry is really based upon how many consumers are in the legal space to begin with. And then we looked at average licenses, the investment per license, and then we looked at licenses per state and per sector. And so then we modeled this out, and we looked at some states, and some states don't need any more licenses for the next 10 years. They're oversubscribed, and that was just a lack of discipline by the regulators. And so in this report, we look at how many new licenses are needed and how much are those licenses worth from an investment perspective, and then we put a number on that through 2035. And so this report has a lot of data in it. Sales forecasts, delinquent payment issues, current estimates for funding, all sorts of stuff. We also call out risks, and so we look at which states are super saturated and little to no opportunity from a startup investment perspective. So I wanted to go through some data now. We're forecasting a 2024 total retail sales of right around $32 billion. And this is set to double in the next 4 or 5, 6 years. And so the growth is mainly coming from new and emerging markets. The mature markets have kind of tapped out. They've peaked and some are in decline. In 2023, 10 states had declining revenues, which was surprising to a lot of people. But there's still growth to be had in this space. And then ultimately, as reforms take hold, as consumers participate in a greater number, then we're forecasting $87 billion in 10 years. So some of the findings from the report. So when we look at the total investment opportunity, the midpoint, we do a low end, midpoint, and high end. The midpoint was $92 billion. And we broke that down between existing refinance opportunities and then total investment potential. And so with this, a lot of opportunity, and it's cumulative, but this is through 2035. And so we also wanted to level set the readers of these reports about what's going on now. And earlier this year, I published a report on delinquencies and delinquent payment issues in the cannabis space. And at the end of 2023, there was over $3.8 billion in delinquent accounts receivables. And it was really heavily weighted towards cultivation, but surprisingly, those that were vertically integrated also had a big accounts receivable delinquency. And so this talks about the health of the industry. And by looking at the health of the industry, then you can see where the problems are and how to address them. And then there's a little bit of data here, so you can't quite see the refinance number, but I showed it on the previous slide. But $3.8 billion in delinquent accounts receivable. I had attended and spoke at a conference with CFOs and accountants A little bit more boring than economists, by the way. And when we talked about rescheduling and reform, a lot of the responses about what you would do with that freed up cash flow was more towards shoring up the delinquent accounts receivable and paying down debt. And so then it would flow into the consumer areas with decreased pricing and greater participation. And so a lot of the forecast is based upon licenses. And so we have a model whereby we can look at the amount of revenue and legal participation and then how many licenses that corresponds to from a cultivation perspective, from a product manufacturing perspective and retail. And what we found is that there's tremendous growth opportunity for the retail sector because they're the ones that give access to the consumer. Process manufacturing gets, and product manufacturing gets the products into the retailer, but cultivation is heavily oversubscribed right now. There's a lot of states that have issued way too many licenses. I think Oklahoma is a good example of that. Oregon is another one. And so there may not necessarily be as many opportunities for cultivation as there is for retail and product manufacturing. And so, and one note is on the cultivation side, there's still opportunity, but you have to go state by state and really see where the regulations are and where the license counts are and how much license capacity there is. And so total investment potential, midpoint $48 billion in new money. In addition, that's in 2030. By 2035, that grows to $78 billion. And so that's new money that is required to support the growth and development of those new licensees. And that's not including the refinance. And I think these numbers align with what Scott and others at Viridian had presented earlier. And so a lot of this data is tying between one entity to another and to mine. And so top 10 states for opportunity. Now California, because of the large market there, has a lot of potential, especially in the retail sector and the product manufacturing sector. There's little to no opportunity in the cultivation because they have so much capacity online. But just because there's opportunity for investment, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're off the hook from a due diligence perspective. So you really need to dig into that market and understand the regulatory issues, the illicit opportunities, or the impact of the illicit market, opt-out policies and like. I recently spoke to some folks in New York, for example, and the opt-out issue is impacting economic opportunities for cannabis investors and operators in various parts of New York as well. But as the market evolves and as consumers start participating, it'll level off, and then new and emerging states will take hold. And by 2035, we're forecasting that Texas, which is a really big market, which is relatively underserved, if at all, except for hemp maybe, there's a good opportunity for there. And some people are already investing in the infrastructure now so that they can take advantage of it when reform occurs. And so here's just a sample of the data that we're presenting in the report. I just chose 3 states. It breaks it down by year, by sector, by total. We do that for ranking purposes. And in some states like California, I mentioned that cultivation doesn't have as many opportunities, let's say, as other states. And so sponsors of the report, there's C-Trust. They're doing credit rating and risk monitoring. They're working with banks and other operators and institutions. Green Check is really well known. They've been sponsor of multiple conferences, and they're really looking at the way to refinance and structure and drive compliance into the industry. And so, let's see. So we're going to publish the executive summary next week, and then the report shortly thereafter. And so if you have any questions, let us know. Here's some contact information for the report. And so I was given just 10 minutes to speak and provide some of this data, and my time's up. And so if you have any questions or want to talk more specifics about opportunities, investments, and the like, just let me know. I'll be out in the lobby out there, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.